Hi, and this is just some guy talking about Doctor Who. Today I'll be talking about Mission to the Unknown. And before I start, I just want to point out that Ian Levine tried to privately fund an American company to animate all the missing episodes, and as a pilot for this, they animated Mission to the Unknown. So whilst it's never been released, this is actually an animated story and is available on YouTube and Dailymotion. So the story itself, well, there isn't really much of a story. It's only 25 minutes long. It's basically the classic era equivalent of one of those Series 6 prequels that they had just so many of. It of course doesn't feature the Doctor or any of the companions, though William Hartnell was still credited because of contractual obligations. But this story instead features Mark Corey, played by Edward D'Souza, who is a Space Security Service, I think it was, officer who's trapped on the planet Kemble, which is surrounded by Daleks, and there are these Virga plants which are actually very interesting. The Virga plants, you get stung by one, it takes over your mind, you start killing all your friends, and then you turn into one. And it's surprising they haven't returned to that idea. But there isn't really much happens in the story. Basically, a bunch of ambassadors from space come together, go into a truce with the Daleks, and Corey makes a message saying what's happening and then gets killed and doesn't manage to broadcast it. And it's basically just a setup for the Daleks' master plan, and had it been broadcast 4 weeks later, it probably would have been considered just the Daleks' master plan part 1. Of course, like the Daleks' master plan, it was only sold overseas once to Australia, though it's possible this one might have been sold to Singapore, it's unknown. But it was sold to Australia, wasn't broadcast, and was presumably then destroyed. But some episodes of the Daleks' master plan from that shipment have been found, so who knows. The reason why this story was made was because Verity Lambert wanted the actors to have an extended holiday because they were working 40-something weeks out of the year. From having this story, it meant that William Hartnell, Peter Purves and Maureen O'Brien had 6 weeks holiday instead of 5. This of course was also the last story that Verity Lambert worked on as producer before I think it was Innes Lloyd took over from the Mythmakers onwards. But because this was such a small production, they didn't really have it with its own serial number. So that led to the complication of what is its serial number, and nobody knew this. But then, years later, they found a copy of the script which had the serial number listed as TA. So technically this was produced as Galaxy 4 Episode 5, but was sort of like an appendix to it, really. So it's surprising that it's not debated whether it's considered it's a story in its own right, because of course there are stories that are debated whether to be included in a number of Doctor Who stories. Sharda, where the Trial of Time Lord is 4 or 1 parts, whether Utopia, The Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords are 1 or 2 stories, and whether Heaven Sent and Hell Bent are the same story. With many of these, the answer is no, 1, no, and God no. But with Mission to the Unknown, everyone accepts it as a story in its own right, which is interesting because really it basically just is the Daleks' Master Plan Episode 1. It's weird they put the Mythmakers in between them because people tuned in, saw the Daleks and thought, oh my god, the Daleks are back, I'm tuning in next week. And were then very confused when they then had a story set, ancient Greece. So they should have just made it part of the Daleks' Master Plan, but I think because it was in the production with Galaxy 4 that they probably had to broadcast it alongside it. Because of course back in those days they had individual episode titles, so you think it'd be easy, well it's just Mission to the Unknown because it's a single parter. But when it was sold on and when it was referenced during production, because they were used to referring to episodes by their episode titles but then having serial titles, it isn't actually called Mission to the Unknown. Well, it's it is. There's another name for it, and that's the Dalek Cutaway. And describing the story as a cutaway really is much more apt for what it really is. And it was when it was sold to Australia, it was under the title of Mission to the Unknown Dalek Cutaway. That's another title for it, so it's not necessarily called Mission to the Unknown, but you'd think it'd be the simplest one to title it, but that's just another production thing. Because it was such a small episode, its production was weird. But this is a story that's always fascinated me, because when Terry Nation was asked to write a story not featuring the Doctor or his companions and was essentially set up to Dalek's master plan, he of course already had his ideas for the TV series The Destroyers, which of course was the failed attempt to make a Dalek spin-off series. And it'd be interesting to know what would have happened had this been successful, because of course the Daleks were gotten rid of in Doctor Who between 1967 and 1973. And the show did very successfully without them. Whereas the Daleks in their own show would have allowed them to be, much more evil than they are in Doctor Who. So it would have been interesting to see what this series would have been like. But of course it fell through and was never made, and this is the closest we've got to having the Destroyers. But to show how interesting it would have been for this series to have been produced, which would you be more excited for? The announcement that they're bringing 3 more series to class, or the announcement of the found mission to the unknown? Yeah, I thought so. This is a story that's very interesting. It's a shame that this one's lost, really. It was the second last story to be destroyed before Fury from the Deep in 1974, and it's one that would probably be quite like to come back. It's only 1 serial, which is surprising, but it's unlikely because, of course, there was only 1 copy made, much like the Dalek's master plan. But again, they found parts of the Dalek's master plan, so they could find this potentially. I doubt it, though. To criticise this story, some of the aliens do look a bit stupid and don't really do anything. Like there's the big Christmas tree one, and there's the guy in the diver's suit. There's the guy with the big neck brace. And they're all basically just extras. But until 2004, it wasn't realised that these characters were actually recast and were slightly redesigned for the Daleks' master plan, which nobody knew, because the only known images of these were the promotional images for Mission to the Unknown. It wasn't until Day of Armageddon was found in 2004 that we realised there were actually changes to their design. But if there's one thing I have to pick out, is that when one of them says, "Oh, soon we will we shall take over the galaxy. Mars, Venus, Jupiter." Oh God, get in my throat. Ow. "The outer moon colonies." And then the Daleks are like, "Yes, but most importantly of all, the Earth." Now, they're planning their takeover of the galaxy, yet they seem to be describing their plans to invade the solar system, which is quite a big feat, the solar system, that's a big place. But it's nothing compared to invading the entire galaxy. Why they seem to have been as small-minded to say, just Mars, Venus, Jupiter and the moon colonies, that doesn't really make sense, especially seeing how these aliens themselves are from outside the solar system, so I don't see why they have such an interest in us. But other than this, it's quite a good first single part. Though the fact that it's completely missing, we only have the studio pictures and a few promotional images to go by for this, so we don't really know about wobbly sets or poor acting or anything like that. So there isn't really, it isn't really easy to criticise in that respect. But this is basically just Dalek's Master Plan Episode 1, and probably should have been saved for 4 weeks later. But again, it was probably because it was in the same production block as Galaxy 4. Yeah, there's not really much more to say about Mission to the Unknown. So, next week, I will be doing story number 217. That's a new Who episode, so let's see. And just saying, I'd rather people put in the comments what stories they would like me to talk about, because using a random number generator, I could end up talking about those boring and unwanted stories. So let's see what I come up with. Rebel Flesh / the Almost People. Oh great. Oh great. Yes, I'm gonna. Oh great. Okay, so next week I will be talking about the Rebel Flesh / the Almost People.